Let the one who has two shoes sell one and buy a sword. And the one who has two trousers has to sell one and buy a sword. Because now it is time for revolution, and this revolution is no longer on streets. This revolution is not about burning cars, but this revolution is in the mind. Because if the mind has not been transformed, nothing we can do with our hands will be meaningful to our lives and to our struggle for liberation. Peace and blessing, peace and power to all African family from wherever you find yourself, in the continent or in the diaspora. On behalf of the African Continental Unity Party, we salute you with the revolutionary greetings. And today, I just want to share some thoughts. Actually, it's a question that I want to put out there for us to reflect upon. The question is simply stating, why is Africa still underdeveloped up until today? This is a very important question we need to ask every time. The reason we need to ask questions because everything in life is done through the process of questions and answers. Anything in life is done through this process, questions and answers. When you begin to ask questions, you open your mind to discover certain realities that you cannot discover if you don't ask questions. And the process of asking questions is what we call reflection or what we call thinking. You know, when you come across a reality, you begin to look at it from different angles. Looking at it from different angles, you asking yourself questions. What is this reality? How can I approach it? So everything that you do around that reality is asking questions. And the process of asking those questions is what actually help people, every people in the world, to solve any problems that they are facing in this world. There's no a magic formula that people use to develop their nations. When you see Singapore, when you see China, when you see Russia, the United States of America, they have all gone through the same process of questions and answers, being faced by certain situations. You know, in a particular time, they had to ask questions. How can we solve this situation? How can we go about solving these situations? And the number of questions that we ask will give us wisdom and the knowledge and also understanding on how we can solve our problems. So this situation cannot be different from where we're finding ourselves today as African people, with this important question of why is Africa still underdeveloped? You know, we have a lot of resources, we have a lot of things, we have skills and we have minds, but why is Africa still lagging behind, you know, in on the list of developed nations? Why is Africa entirely still finding itself or herself on the list of global south or otherwise nations that are less developed? This is what we are going to reflect upon today. I'm going to put just some few points to help us think beyond the paradigms to see what we can actually do to help ourselves developing. Now, the first thing that I believe is very important, that is the reason why Africa is not developing as it should be. When we look all the resources that we have in Africa, Africa should be the first and the most developed nation in the world, but we are actually lagging behind. And some of us are thinking that the resources that we have or the natural resources that we have are the curse that we have that is keeping us in the conditions of underdeveloped. So the first thing that is keeping African people being underdeveloped and the African continent being underdeveloped is that we are getting comfortable with knowing too much, but we're doing little. This is the first thing. We are getting comfortable in knowing too much, but doing little. If you look in the 1960s, during the time of African independence, you will realize that there were few graduates around the continent, very few graduates in the continent, right? Very few PhD degrees. I don't even know if there were more than five, particularly in the Congo where I was born. I don't even know if there were more than five. But look at these people in the 1960s who were not really educated as we are today. They were able to shake the structures of colonialism to the point where colonialists had to step back and agree to the conditions of the change that was taking place during that time. In other words, they had to step back, and some of them had to go back to Europe and obviously struck a deal that is today known as African independence. Even though we know that we don't have a true independence, because independence cannot be negotiated for. Anyway, we'll put that for another topic for another day. So the point here is that we had few graduates that were able to change the status quo by helping Africa to become what we call today independence. But today, when we compare the number of graduates that we had at that time and the number of graduates that we have today, the situation is completely different. We have more graduates today. We have more PhD degrees. We have more master's degrees. We have more, bachelor degrees in Africa. But the point is, why are we doing so poorly compared to what was done in the 1960s and 1970s when we had just a few graduates in the continent? This is a very important question we need to ask. And the reason it's simple is because we are now dealing with the people who are comfortable to know much but to do just little. In other words, we are getting comfortable to have degrees, to have the titles. I'm a PhD degrees. I'm a master's degrees. I know this. I've studied the history. I can understand the history. But what do you do with your knowledge? Nothing. That's the reason why Africa is where it is today and is actually heading to a complete destruction if we don't wake up before the end of this 21st century. It's very important that we all understand this, right? Because knowledge, in most cases, it mistakenly say that knowledge is a power. But in reality, when you think about it, knowledge is not the power, right? Knowledge is a potential power, because many people know what to do in every situation, but many people as well find themselves dying even though they knew what to do. For example, how many people know that driving and texting on the phone is dangerous? Almost everyone. But how many people find themselves in accidents because they didn't apply that knowledge? They were driving and texting at the same time. Many people. How many people know what to do in order to lose weight? Many people. But how many people are obese in the world today? Many people. So in other words, the fact that you know something, it doesn't make you powerful, doesn't put you in a position to change your reality. Until you begin to apply the knowledge that you have, then that application of knowledge gives you the power to change your reality. And that's what we call wisdom, the capacity to apply your knowledge. That's what we call wisdom. So the reality today is that we know much about the history. We know much about the Kemetic world. We know much about Egypt. We know much about colonialism. We know much about slavery. We know all these things. We know much about philosophy, economy, politics. Good. What do we do with this knowledge? Nothing. In most cases. That's the reason why Africa is not full of people who know much but who do little. That's the reason. That's the first reason that Africa is underdeveloped. Now, for us to really see a development taking place in Africa, what we need to do is to begin apply the knowledge that we have gained. For example, we know that the countries as we have them today have been a definition given to us by our oppressors. None of African founding fathers or none of African independent fighters was the one who actually created the countries in which we're living today. When you tell me about Nigeria, it was not created by African people. Congo has never been created by African people as we know it today. South Africa, any nation in in the continent, you cannot name me a particular nation that was created by African people and the borders were designed by African people. All these countries are the creation of your oppressor and my oppressor. We know that, and we know the key for us to develop Africa is to come together and build a collective, a collective front that can help us to work together collectively and challenge the status quo of imperialism. But what do we do with that knowledge? Little. We are still inclined into our nationality, fake nationalities that have been created by our oppressors to divide us, to control us, and to dominate us. You see? There's no application of knowledge. We are getting comfortable only in knowing much but doing little. This is number one challenge that we have, and that is keeping Africa in the conditions of underdevelopment. Number two, we know the way forward, right? We know the way forward, but we pretend. So number two is actually pretension. We try to pretend, or we try to deal with symbols that have no power. For example, we know that for Africa to change, for the world to become a better world, we need a revolution, a massive revolution. And when I'm saying revolution, as I said from the beginning, it doesn't necessarily mean burning cars, marching on streets and doing all kind of riots. No, that is not a revolution. Revolution is changing of values. What kind of values are actually making your society to function? What kind of values are at the core of your society functionality? These are the important things that we need to understand when it comes to revolution. So when you come up as a revolution, all that you need to do is to actually preach and begin to do things that will obviously change the value systems that govern your society or your community. For example, we are living in the world that is dominated by capitalist value systems, a world that is dominated by European democracy, which is not really constructive to the African need of democracy, if we have to use that word, for the lack of better world. We are dealing with a world that is dominated by Western value systems, whether it comes to education, entertainment, economy, politics, labor, law, religion, sex, and war. All the 9 areas of human activities have been dominated and are still being dominated by the Western value systems, right? And the Western thinking. So we cannot progress in this world. We cannot build our society as African people within the paradigm created, fashioned by the people who otherwise never wanted you to be free and to be independent and to develop. So we need a revolution to overthrow the system, to change the system in order to create another system with a value systems that is actually based on African philosophy and African understanding. That is what we talk about revolution. We know that, but how do we act about that? Many people claim to be revolutionary, but their revolution is only about commenting a post on WhatsApp, a post on Facebook. Their revolution is about crying, crying and denouncing things. But we don't change things by just posting on Facebook, by just commenting on Facebook. By the way, please comment here, like the video and share. It's also one of the ways to help what we do. But however, we need to understand that is not the revolution that we want. You cannot become a revolutionary by only commenting on WhatsApp, by only commenting on some post on Facebook or Twitter or whatever. Revolution is action and constant action. We also have other kinds of the so-called revolutionaries today who are only reactionaries. You see them on social medias when things are bad. When, for example, African person get killed, I don't know, in America, or a situation happens, that way you see them popping up on social media with posts and stuff like that and calling themselves revolutionaries. But that is not a revolution. A revolutionary is not a reactionary, because every time you react after your oppressor has acted, what you do, you are giving him the power to control your life. Let me restate that again. Every time we react after the oppressor has acted, it means he controls our lives and he controls our destiny. And that is not a revolution. Revolutionaries are the people who are thinking ahead of time, who plan ahead of time, and who execute their plans. Whether there's a bad situation or a good situation, revolutionaries are the people who understand themselves and understand their environment. And therefore, they can foresee whatever that can take place in the next 5 years, in the next 10 years. And by that understanding, they can obviously design some goals that have to obviously keep them in charge and in power of their destinies. So who are revolutionaries in Africa today? Those who are just crying, on social medias? No, that's not a revolution, because you cry because your enemy has done something and therefore he controls your life, because your revolution is only based on reaction. But revolution is not about reaction, it's about action, it's about vision. You must have a vision by looking at the situation, at the system that is controlling or oppressing the world today, and then come up with a vision that can eventually replace the system in your life, in your community, in your country, and therefore begin to build there. And that is a revolution. And revolution does not wait for time to be right. Revolution is not something that happens after 1 month, after 2 months. No, revolution is constant. If you are revolutionary, you must ask yourself every day, what are you doing in order to fulfill your vision of revolution, in order to fulfill your vision of change that you want to bring in the society? As we said, revolution is all about changing the values that govern a particular society. So what are you doing to push a particular value system against the capitalist values that are obviously dominating our world today? What are you doing in order to push a particular value systems or a particular worldview that is obviously will go against the worldview of Western democracy that has trapped Africa to the condition where we are today? That is a revolution. It's constant. It's not reactionary. It's actionary. It's visionary. That's very important for us to understand. Now, based on these facts of revolution, constant revolution, we have what we call the African Continental Unity Party. And this is a revolutionary party, an African party that goes beyond the boundaries. You see, as we said from the beginning, that we have been defined by the oppressors in terms of small prisons or small cells that we are enjoying, in which we are enjoying today. We call ourselves nations, right? But these are the small cells that were designed by our oppressors so that they can be able to control and to dominate us. So now, by understanding this reality, we need to come up with a revolutionary agenda that challenge the definition of the oppressors of our lives. And this definition agenda, or this revolutionary agenda, based on our own definition of who we are. We identify ourselves as African people. We are not proud to be Congolese because our forefathers never created Congo as it is today. We are not proud to be Nigerian, Ghanaian, because our forefathers never created Ghana and Nigeria as we have it today. And every time we wake up in the morning and remembering that we are Ghanaian, we are Ghanaians, we are Nigerians, we are, Togolese. We feel so bad in our minds because this is a definition, this is a value system, this is a worldview of the oppressor over us, but it's not our decision. It was not our decision, our choice, or our value system. Therefore, we are in this revolutionary program called the African Continental Unity Party. If you haven't been able to join us, if you have never heard about us, check in the description. There's a link that will lead you to the website to find more about us and to register and to become part of us. And one important thing that we want to push within this party, the African Continental Unity Party, is all the power must be given to people. Actually, not even given, because the word given does make really sense, but in reality is people must take the power back. It means we must wake up today as African people, as common citizens, and take whatever that belongs to Caesar and make it ours. Anything that belongs to Caesar, we must take it and make it ours, because in fact, we are the ones who have given to Caesar the power to oppress us. Now, what am I saying exactly? Which is the vision of AC, or the goal of the ACP, is to make people at the center of all the decisions that are being taken in our countries, in our societies. For example, in the political reality of your country today, I don't know whether you are from Sierra Leone, from Togo, from, I don't know, Uganda, from Angola. The reality of your nation, just like in other African nations, is that you go after every 5 years to elect leaders, to elect, I don't know, your parliamentarians. And then you go back and sit down. And these people now have to take important decisions over your life. But in most cases, what we don't realize is that these people have been already bought by some forces or some powers, you know, in the international level. In most cases, they're being bought by corporates, multinational corporates. They are being bought and given a mandate. So you just actually approve them, but you don't give them a mission. You don't have a control in whatever decision they are taking when they are into power. And as a result, they always take decisions, they always make amendments that go against our expectation. We elect them expecting that they will create jobs in our communities. We elect them expecting that they will create the economic conditions, they will create justice, they will reduce corruption in our communities. But it's only the opposite that happens. Why? Because we are not in charge of our nations. And what ACUP pushes is actually that you and I can become at the center of the reality, at the center of the decision making in our nations, in a way that before the people in the parliaments can amend a particular law or policy, that policy must be subjected to the votes of the masses. You and I must evaluate that policy. You and I must evaluate that law. And if it works for us, if it's for our benefit as the common citizens of Africa, we can then amend it. We can vote for it. And if we say yes to that policy, then whoever who is in charge, president or prime minister, who has the power to amend a particular policy, then can go ahead and amend it. If we don't do this, we are then accepting the fact that our politicians will remain in the pockets of the lobbyist group or the lobbyist groups, because there are many who always pre-select politicians before we get to know them and give politicians mandates and obviously fund their campaigns and put them in power in order to execute their own agenda of free market economy, of liberalization of the markets, so that we can find ourselves in a situation where we are being dumped with products from overseas and our own products at home cannot compete with cheaper products produced, I don't know, in China or in Singapore and elsewhere. This is what is happening. We're finding ourselves in situations whereby our lands are being taken over by Chinese corporations, not to produce food that the masses want, but only to produce foods for profit making. We're finding ourselves in a situation whereby in our communities we have heavy industries that are polluting our environment by, plundering the resources in extravagant manner. That's the future. That will not make an easy task for the future generations to find some kind of natural resources under our land so that they can live through that. And this is happening in our eyes because we are only there to elect people, but we don't elect or have a choice in the decisions that are making. So if you are joining ACUP, or if you have never joined the ACUP, this is actually the change, one of the changes that we want to bring in our society. And we believe that for us to change the status quo in Africa, for us to redeem ourselves, for us to actually rebuild Africa, we must seize the power structure that makes decision in our countries individually. We must seize the power as common citizens of the African continent, because the change in Africa, the development that we need in Africa is not a top-down process. It means the leaders that we have in Africa cannot bring a proper development that we want in the continent, because they are all being employed by the Western powers to work for the Western powers. They are not working for the benefits of the people. Of course, there's no rules without exceptions. There might be few who try as much as they can to do something good, but they do that at the cost of their own lives. They do that at the cost of their own lives. And we have many that you and I know that have died because they've attempted to do something that is going against the status quo. Status quo which emphasized that all African leaders are employees of former colonial powers, and therefore they must work for the former colonial powers. So whenever somebody wants to do something different, to work for the people who have elected them, apparently, it becomes a challenge to the power structure of the Western imperialism. Now we need to understand this. For us to change this reality, we must seize the power, because the change in Africa should begin from the bottom. If the bottom, which is the basis, has never changed, has never transformed, has never seized the power, and is not able to use the power, there's nothing that the top, which is the leadership, can do that will bring meaningful change and transformation in our societies. So this is very important for us as African people to understand, because for a long time we have relied on a particular supernatural person to come and deliver Africa. In most cases, as we're speaking right now, somewhere in the continent, in Africa, there are a group of people who are praying for God to change Africa, or for God to deliver Africa. And this is these are the things that we have done since the 1960s. We have been praying for Africa, never change. We have been waiting for a supernatural leader to come and deliver us and develop us and bring jobs, bring economy, bring development. Never happened, and we continue to do the same thing. You see, a fool is the one who does the same thing repeatedly and expecting different results. But you and I are not fools, because we are now opened in our mind. Our eyes have now been opened to see the reality that what we have been doing for the past 60 years have never succeeded to create the conditions of freedom that we want in Africa. Therefore, we need something different. And that something different means there is no more time to wait for a particular leader to come and save us. We are our own saviors, and we need to rise and seize the power structure and bring the change that we want to see in Africa. And how do we do it? We do it through this program that we are presenting to you, that we are carrying within the African Continental Unity Party. It is called the African Inclusive Democracy. African Inclusive Democracy emphasizes that people must seize the power, people must amend all the policy, all the laws that govern their lives, because anything, any policy, any agenda, any, law that affects your life must get you involved into it. Any policy, any law, any agenda that has impact, or effect in your life, negative or positive, must be having you involved in it. If it doesn't involve you, then it is an imposition, and therefore it is an oppression. And we have been living under oppression for a long time. Now it is time that we need to rise and seize the power. So if you are listening to this video, the call is to you to join the African Continental Unity Party, and all of us together, we shall rise against the power structure and demand that those in power must create a platform that allows us as citizens to have a voice in whatever amendment that is to be done that has an impact in social life. We must rise and declare to the power structure that they must create a platform that gives us an opportunity to vote for every law and every policy that they come up with that will have an impact in our social life. And if we don't do this, before the end of the 21st century, we must, in otherwise, make peace with the chains that are bounding us today, and that will continue to bound us for the rest of our life. We must understand that we need to make peace with these mental chains, with these economic chains, with these political chains that are keeping us in the situation of precarity and the situation of sufferings. But if we want the change, we need to embark in this revolutionary agenda that is carried out by the African Continental Unity Party through its objective of African inclusive democracy, as I've explained it, and I will continue to explain this so that you and I can understand, can internalize this, and can realize that it is the only way we can change the reality in our nations and in our lives, is by us to seize the power structure and to be the decision makers every time a new law, every time a new policy has to be amended that will have an impact in our social lives. Every time a multinational company has to be given a concession for the mining purpose, the community in that area must have a voice, a legally and formal voice. And if they say no, that concession shouldn't be given to that multinational, right? Every time a foreign company, a multinational company need to get some kind of benefits in terms of tax reduction, as it is happening, in secret in Africa today, the African people must be aware of that and must be able to say yes or no. This particular multinational company must be given the benefits of tax reduction, because it's happening so because those who make the laws have been given money, have been given their checks, and your interest and my interest is not really at the hearts of of the deals that they are doing, they are making with these corporations. So how can we change the situation? By asking them no. In this 21st century, only a fool is the one who appeals to the good consciousness of political leaders. They don't have one. They don't have a good consciousness, and we cannot appeal on them. We must make sure that we make them realize that we are now up and reclaiming our rights, and we are ready to take what belongs to Caesar and make it ours, because in reality it belongs to us. Caesar never brought what he has today. We by ignorance have given everything that Caesar has, and it is time that we take back what belongs to Caesar. And to finish this, let me tell you this, it's very important. We have a situation now in Africa whereby our leaders must listen to this properly. Our leaders are afraid to challenge the power structure. Just look recently what happened when it came to voting against Russia. Almost all African nations, with a few exceptions, have sided with European nations and America to vote against Russia, even though they know that American government is the biggest terrorist group or terrorist organization in the world, right? The US government is the biggest terrorist organization in the world, all together with the European allies. Why am I saying so? Because they are the ones who have gone across the world, dropping bombs on schools, dropping bombs on hospitals to kill children in order to capture or to kill one so-called terrorist, while themselves are the biggest terrorists in the world. So now these African nations, they know very well, these leaders, they know very well, but because they are afraid, they had to side with these oppressors to vote against Russia. It's good. So the bottom line is that whenever a person is elected into power position in Africa, he begins to look in how he can please America, he can please the European Union, so that he can save himself, right? Because he knows that if he goes against them, he might not last in power, or he might not last in this world and this reality. And therefore, in searching to accommodate American interest, they are jeopardizing us as African citizens who have elected for them. So now what are we supposed to do? We must also create the conditions of fear for African leaders. The same way they are afraid of Europe or European or of the West, they should find themselves in a situation where they are also afraid of the citizens. Because until we create this condition, we cannot create the balance, in the leadership. Because when we look now, they are not afraid of us. They know that they can manipulate us. They can do anything. And after 5 years, they will come back to us to ask us again to go and elect for them. And when they are elected, they begin to please their masters who are in Europe, who are in America, sometimes now who are in China, because those masters are the ones who give them money, who give them checks. And us, they don't feel accountable to us because we do nothing. So now we need to begin creating the conditions of insecurity to them, the same way they feel insecure, towards America. And that is when then we can create a balance. When they are afraid of the masses, the same way they are afraid of the West, they will be careful in whatever they do, in whatever decision that they are making, because they know there are consequences from both sides. They know that there can be consequences from the West, and they also know that there can be consequences from from their citizens or from the common citizens. Until we create this reality, we cannot be sure that we have a good leadership that will appeal to our needs and that will work for our interest. It's very important that we need to understand, right? And this is what the ACUP is all about. So if you haven't joined the ACUP, please join us. If really you love Africa and you want to see Africa changing and developing, it is time that you join us. And together we build. We are in need of the people who can champion this revolutionary agenda in Ghana. We are in the process to register in Ghana, but we don't have people who really show commitment, who will really stand up, say that I love Africa and I will do anything that it requires to get this agenda of African liberation going forward. So you, if you are listening to me and you have this envy and this, this mind and this love, unconditional love for Africa, which is love for yourself, then join us. Let us build this agenda together. Let us take this movement to the next level. Let us make this an inheritance for our kids, the same way that we have inherited pyramids from our ancestors. We need to hand over this institution of liberation and of revolution to our kids so that they can build on this and make sure that Africa will never get lost again under the shadow of imperialism. But Africa will be again that global power base that we want as it was in the past. And above all, remember this. Your religion is important. Your culture is important. Your knowledge of history is even more important. Your job that pays the bill is very important. But your life and my life will never change until we embark in the politics of our liberation. But if we don't do that, we then choose to enjoy the politics of our oppression. Peace and power to you, African families. From wherever you find yourself, it was pleasure from my side to interact with you through these few lines that we have just discussed. So please share this video, like it, and comment, and most importantly, join us and let's build this together. Let's fight together because this is worth it. This is worth it. There's no other option than fighting together, uniting Africa through a revolutionary agenda that aims to change the value systems that govern our lives and govern our society. We cannot develop Africa with pure capitalistic mindset or the Western democratic system, which is a fake, by the way. But we can change Africa if we as a common people from the grassroots levels seize the power structures and get involved in all important decisions that shape the reality of our lives and of our entire society. So if we have two shoes, you need to sell one and buy a sword. If you have two trousers, you need to sell one and buy a sword. Why? Because now it is time for revolution. And this revolution is no longer on streets. It's not about protesting. It's not about crying Black Lives Matters. No. This revolution is all about thinking. If we begin to engage our minds before we engage our hands, we will see a world that we have created for ourselves and by ourselves. But if we engage our bodies and hands before we engage our minds, we are engaging on the world that has been created by other people. It's very important that you understand this. Peace and power. See you again. Please share and like. Thank you.